They call it pink gold. Potash is a vital ingredient for growing food and Canada production volume. It's now being touted as a secret weapon in this trade war with the United States.
A nation under pressure, Canada's strategic response to U.S. trade tensions. They call it pink gold. Potash, a vital ingredient in fertilizer, is now at the heart of a political storm between Canada and the United States. With the looming threat of a 35% tariff on Canadian imports, Canada is contemplating its most significant trade leverage in decades. The countdown to August 1st is ticking, and President Trump's threats to impose sweeping tariffs on Canadian goods could reshape the future of North American trade. Behind closed doors, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is walking a delicate line. The nation's economy is still heavily dependent on its southern neighbor, but Trump has turned tariffs into a political tool, targeting industries with increasing frequency. Carney's approach has been to quietly maneuver, pausing Canada's digital services tax, offering limited defense cooperation through the U.S. missile shield, and steering clear of public confrontation. But as the trade war escalates, critics in Canada say that a stronger response is necessary. Enter potash. For decades, Canada has been the world's largest producer of this key fertilizer ingredient, with its reserves mostly located in Saskatchewan. Potash is essential for global food production. Without it, the effectiveness of fertilizers, which help grow food for half the world's population, would be significantly compromised. For the U.S., which consumes over 5 million tons of potash annually but only produces a small fraction of that, Canada is a critical supplier. In 2023, the U.S. produced just 400,000 metric tons of potash, making it heavily reliant on Canadian exports. Unlike other industries that could see supply chains disrupted or rerouted, such as automobiles or electronics, potash is irreplaceable. With key global suppliers like Russia and Belarus under sanctions or facing political instability, Canada remains the world's primary reliable source of this resource. Any disruption in the flow of potash would send fertilizer prices soaring, and with them, the cost of food, something no country, especially one as agriculturally dependent as the U.S., can afford. This vulnerability has led Canadian leaders to suggest using potash as a bargaining chip in trade negotiations with the U.S. The idea? Halt the $4.9 billion worth of potash exports to the U.S., or even create a national strategic reserve supported by public investment through bonds. The logic behind this is clear. If Trump is using economic pain as leverage, Canada should do the same. By directly impacting U.S. farmers, a key political constituency for the president, Canada could force a recalibration in Washington. However, this strategy is not without risks. Potash is more than just an industrial input. It is directly tied to food security and inflation. Disrupting its flow could have global ramifications, not only harming U.S. farmers, but also affecting global food prices. Industry leaders in Saskatchewan warn that weaponizing potash would be a dangerous gamble. For them, it's not just about the trade of goods, it's about maintaining the stability of the world's food supply. Still, some argue that Canada may not need to issue threats at all. The dependency of the U.S. on Canadian potash, combined with the market imbalance, already gives Canada considerable leverage. The mere threat of disruption could be enough to shift the balance in the ongoing trade war. As President Trump thrives on confrontation, expecting others to blink first, Canada is poised to resist, not with loud confrontations, but with quiet strategic moves. Potash, often regarded as Canada's hidden economic strength, might just be the one weapon strong enough to bring Trump back to the negotiating table. Canada's energy strategy. Navigating the trade war with strategic infrastructure shifts. In the face of U.S. tariffs, Canada's strategy is expanding beyond the trade of commodities like potash. The country is positioning itself as an energy powerhouse, diversifying its energy exports and reshaping its energy infrastructure. While Trump uses tariffs to squeeze Canada, Ottawa is responding with something more substantial, actions that could fundamentally alter the balance of power between the two nations. One of the most significant moves in Canada's trade response involves its energy sector. Prime Minister Mark Carney has confirmed that Canada is moving forward with plans to build a pipeline connecting Alberta's oil sands to the Pacific coast. This east-west pipeline would allow Canada to bypass U.S. refineries, changing the game entirely. This infrastructure project is not just an economic maneuver, but a political one. By reducing its dependence on U.S. buyers, Canada is positioning itself as a competitor on the global stage, no longer confined to the whims of the U.S. energy market. For decades, Canada's oil has flowed southward to the U.S., making up nearly 97% of its exports. This long-standing vulnerability has left Canada at the mercy of U.S. refiners and their pricing power. But with the construction of this new pipeline, Canada will be able to bypass American refineries entirely, shifting its focus to overseas markets, particularly in Asia. This pipeline project dovetails with another monumental shift in Canada's energy policy: the export of liquefied natural gas, LNG. In July 2025, Canada's LNG Canada project shipped its first cargo to North Asia, marking a pivotal moment in the country's energy history. The $40 billion project, the largest private investment in Canadian history, is poised to significantly increase Canada's role in the global energy market. With the capacity to handle 14 million tons of LNG annually, the project could easily double its output in the coming years. Asia's energy demand, particularly in countries like Japan, South Korea, and China, is soaring. As these nations work to reduce coal usage, they are seeking reliable natural gas sources. Canada's Pacific coastline gives it a strategic advantage, allowing it to reach these markets much faster than competitors in the U.S. Gulf Coast. A tanker from British Columbia can reach Asia in half the time it takes for U.S. LNG to make the same journey. This speed advantage could help Canada secure long-term contracts and potentially undercut U.S. LNG ambitions in the region. By entering the Asian LNG market, Canada is diversifying its trade relationships. This shift has serious implications for its trade negotiations with the U.S. In a trade war where tariffs have been wielded as a weapon, Canada now has a powerful counter. If the U.S. continues to impose tariffs on Canadian goods, Canada can direct its energy exports elsewhere, reducing its reliance on the U.S. and weakening Washington's leverage. This new approach isn't just about economics, it's about reclaiming autonomy. Canada's energy infrastructure is undergoing a transformation that could shift the global balance of power. As LNG and oil bypass traditional U.S. routes, the U.S. will be forced to contend with the reality that its reliance on Canadian energy might not be as unshakable as once believed. The infrastructure is already in place, and if Canada continues down this path, the U.S. may find itself locked out of a critical energy source. While Canada's energy future is now less tied to the U.S., the country's deepening trade relationship with Asia is poised to become a cornerstone of its strategy. In this new geopolitical landscape, energy isn't just a commodity, it's a critical bargaining chip. As President Trump ramps up tariffs, Canada is responding not with rhetoric, but with real infrastructure and a strategic shift in its energy exports. The trade war may have started with Trump's tariffs, but it is Canada's energy strategy that could change the terms of the entire conflict. Canada's bold economic shift. A new strategy in the face of U.S. tariffs. While Canada's energy sector pivots to international markets, its approach to steel trade is another striking example of how Ottawa is adapting to President Trump's trade war tactics. In June 2025, when Trump imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian steel, the immediate fallout was severe. Canadian steel exports to the U.S. plummeted, and thousands of jobs were jeopardized. But instead of retaliating with more tariffs or threats, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney chose a more calculated and forward-thinking response. Canada, for decades, has been the most open steel market in the world. Nearly two-thirds of its steel consumption has been imported, and over 90% of its steel exports have flowed south to the U.S. This equation, however, is now changing. Canada is implementing a new strategy designed to insulate its domestic market and reduce reliance on the U.S. steel industry. Beginning at the end of July 2025, Canada will impose tariff rate quotas, TRQs, on steel imports from countries without a free trade agreement, FTA, with Canada. Imports will be capped at 50% of their 2024 levels, with any excess subject to a 50% tariff. For countries with FTAs, the import cap will be set at 100%, with a 50% penalty on any overage. This new approach is a strategic shift. Rather than simply retaliating against the U.S. tariffs, Carney is insulating Canada's steel market, reshaping it in a way that strengthens its position moving forward. But it doesn't stop there. In a direct response to China's increasing dominance in global steel markets, Canada is introducing a targeted tariff aimed specifically at Chinese-origin steel. Any product that contains steel melted and poured in China, regardless of where it's finished, will face additional tariffs. This measure is designed to protect Canadian steelmakers from unfair competition while preserving the integrity of the steel market. But Canada's strategy isn't just about protectionism, it's also about investment. In the face of steel tariffs and trade uncertainty, the Canadian government is injecting $1 billion through the Strategic Innovation Fund to help Canadian steel producers modernize their equipment and produce higher-value products. An additional $70 million will be allocated to labor market development agreements, which will assist up to 10,000 steelworkers with training and income support. This investment isn't just aimed at sustaining the steel industry, it's about preparing it for the future. Perhaps the most transformative aspect of Canada's steel strategy is its emphasis on federal procurement. Going forward, Canadian contractors will be required to use Canadian-made steel in major infrastructure, housing, and defense projects. From bridges to shipyards, this new policy will ensure that Canadian steel is embedded in the fabric of national development, reducing the country's reliance on foreign imports while creating new jobs and boosting domestic production. All of these actions are taking place under the shadow of President Trump's trade war. While the U.S. is scheduled to impose a 35% blanket tariff on Canadian imports starting August 1st, Canada has chosen not to retaliate with sweeping countermeasures. Instead, it is holding its ground and using its economic strength strategically. By pausing the digital services tax, coordinating fentanyl responses, and engaging in targeted investments, Canada is making it clear that it will not be bullied into submission. The goal is not to remove tariffs entirely, but to influence where and how they are applied, with a focus on protecting vital sectors like steel, energy, and metals. As Canada prepares for the possibility of a trade war that could escalate further, the country is shifting its focus away from dependency on the U.S. and toward building a more self-reliant, diversified economy. While the outcome of the August 1st deadline remains uncertain, Canada has already begun to decouple its industrial future from the volatility of U.S. trade policy. The move towards energy diversification and the restructuring of the steel market are just the beginning. In the years ahead, Canada will continue to position itself as a global player, not merely reacting to Trump's tariffs, but actively reshaping its own economic future. In the end, this is not just about trade wars or tariffs. It's about Canada taking control of its economic destiny. By leveraging its vast energy resources, modernizing its steel industry, and diversifying trade relationships, Canada is signaling that it is no longer content to be merely a subordinate player in the U.S.-dominated trade game. Whether or not a deal is reached by August 1st, the seeds for a more resilient and independent Canadian economy have already been planted, and the world will be watching to see how this strategy unfolds.